Blacks in technology.
Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology. Welcome everyone to the Blacks in Technology Bit Tech Talk Podcast. This is episode number 101. The Bit Tech Talk Podcast is a show where we talk to people of color who are engineers, innovators, educators, inventors, entrepreneurs doing amazing things in the world of technology. This podcast is where they share their stories, experiences, ideas, knowledge, and perspective on tech with the Bit community. I'm your host, Greg Greenlee, and it is September 1st, 2016. And like I said, this is episode number 101. And tonight our guest is going to be Sherrell Dorsey of ThePlug. If this is your first time listening, you can check us out the following URLs: www.blacksandtechnology.net. We are also on the Twitters. We're at Black and Technology, and that's BLKINTECHNOLOGY. We're also on Facebook, facebook.com/Blacks and Technology. We also have an ever-growing LinkedIn group under Blacks and Technology, so just do a search on LinkedIn for Blacks and Technology. You'll find us there. And if you're listening and you're on Twitter right now, you have any questions for our guests, tweet them using the hashtag BitTechTalk. We are watching the Twitters, so if you have any questions, tweet us. We would love to hear them. So Blacks in Technology, we're a tech-focused community and media organization focused on increasing diversity in technology through increased visibility and participation of people of color in tech. We always focus on forming new partnerships and opportunities to assist our members with their continued professional growth and development. If you want to partner with us, send us an email to contactus@blacksandtechnology.net. Any general inquiries related to sponsorship or anything of the sort, also send those to contactus@blacksandtechnology.net. So a few announcements. Definitely get some announcements out the way before we get started and introduce our guests. I mentioned this before about the Springboard Initiative. They're an organization that provides technical and leadership training to African American youth. They kicked off their pilot August 15th, so about a couple of weeks ago. They had 20 African Americans participating in a 9-month training program with technical training facilitated by the Community College of San Fran and the leadership of professional development conducted by the Bayview YMCA. They are looking for mentors. They desperately need mentors. So if you are in the San Francisco Bay Area and you would love to mentor and help some young African Americans, achieve their goal in entering high tech, definitely reach out to them at info@springboardinitiative.com. They're definitely looking for people to help mentor. Okay, so the Black Enterprise Tech Connect Summit, that is going to be coming up pretty soon. I always forget I think it's in October. Check our website out for that. Right now we're holding a contest for people who are interested in going to the Black Enterprise Connect Summit. But this Tech Connect Summit is a 2-day event filled with insightful tech talks, interactive technology workshops, and one-on-one sessions featuring some of the top minds in tech, such as Tristan Walker. Everybody has heard of, at least, Tristan Walker, founder of Walker and Company Brands, Emmy Archibong, Director of Global Product Partnerships at Facebook, Ty Ahmad Taylor, CEO of THX Limited, and others. So if you're interested in going to the Black Enterprise Connect Summit, tell us why, because we're giving out a couple of free tickets to our BIT members. So let us know why you're interested and how you'll share your experience with the community, and we'll award the tickets to the 2 best submissions. Deadline to apply for this is September 16th by 12 a.m. Because like I said, the actual summit is mid-October, so we want to give people enough time to be able to make travel arrangements, things of that nature. So we're going to cut off submissions at September 16th. So if you go on to our website, blacksandtechnology.net, and you should see an article there. If not, just do a quick search for Tech Connects Summit or Connect Summit, CONNEXT, and it should bring up the article. And in that article, you'll find a link to the form where you have to fill out to become registered to win a free ticket. So, selected candidates will receive a full conference pass, and hotel and travel accommodations are not included. So, it's just a full conference pass to the event. Um, one last, no, a couple more announcements here. Coder Girl, in conjunction with Blacks in Technology and AIGA St. Louis, we are throwing a diversity and tech happy hour. This is an unofficial free event at the Strange Loop conference that's coming up um, in a couple of weeks, actually. I think September 15th it starts. The actual Diversity and Tech Happy Hour is happening September 16th, which is a Friday from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. So just to give you a little bit of insight about what the Diversity and Tech Happy Hour is, it's a joint effort between Blacks in Technology, Coda Girl, and AIGA St. Louis, and we want to give conference attendees coming from all over the nation and the world a chance to experience the diverse community of technologists and designers in St. Louis and that strange loop. So you all have an opportunity to engage in local arts, designs, and things of that nature because it's being held at I guess it's the Centene Center of Arts and Education. So you'll have a chance to mix it up with people coming from all across the nation, talk tech with a diverse group of people. So we definitely hope that you will attend if you are attending Strange Loop. Again, that is happening September 16th at 6 p.m. From 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. and that's Central Time, not Eastern Standard Time. So one thing I didn't mention last week that I want to mention this week is or not last week, but a couple of weeks ago when we had our 100th podcast, is I want to thank Camille Eddy and Kimberly Hill for participating as guests on our latest Blacks in Technology, The Tech Life, Getting Hired Google Hangout web series. It was a fantastic show. They shared their story about their journey in tech and also their experiences as interns at two of the largest tech companies in the world and one of the most competitive tech areas in the world, which is Silicon Valley. So I want to thank both of them for being guests and participating on that show. One last thing, jobs. There are a couple of jobs on our jobs board that I want to make people aware of. D Open Source is looking for a full-time Linux administrator. They are out of Detroit, Michigan, and the Metropolitan Council is looking for an application developer that is versed in .NET, and that is out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. Okay, so that does it for our announcements. So I want to go ahead. I want to introduce our guest. Our guest tonight is Sherrell Dorsey. She is a social impact tech writer covering technology, sustainability, and equity at some leading publications such as Fast Company, Next City. She is the founder of ThePlug, which is the definitive source for daily Black tech news. If you haven't heard of The Plug, you will hear of it tonight, and definitely go and subscribe to it. I'm a subscriber to it. I get news every day in my email, and it is great information, and it's a great way to get exposed to what's going on in tech for people of color. So I want to welcome Sherrell to the show. Welcome.
Hey, Gregory. Thank you. Thank you. So such an honor to be on the show today and to connect with you and your audience. It's awesome.
Thank you. I definitely appreciate it. Definitely glad to have you here. So let's jump into questions. Tell us a little bit about where you're from. What's your education? How'd you get involved in becoming a tech writer?
Absolutely. It's interesting, I think, because I never imagined myself so embedded in this space, but when I look back at my history, it kind of makes sense. So I'm from Seattle, like born and raised. Some people will say they're from Seattle, but they're like from Bellingham, and I'm like, no, your address does not say Seattle, Washington.
Turf war going on.
Yeah, exactly. I'm petty like that, but I'm from Seattle. I'm from Microsoft City, Amazon City. Was raised in those environments, and so I kind of lived in these two worlds where I grew up in inner city Seattle, raised in a single parent household. Did the whole community involvement from, tap dancing, working in my aunt's hair salon, kind of doing that whole thing. And then in high school, got connected with an amazing program called the Technology Access Foundation, which was started by a retired Microsoft millionaire, person of color, not just a person of color, but also part of the LGBT community. And she really wanted to see brown and black kids understanding technology. So she launched this organization in '96 to teach kids to code. And so I fortunately got a chance to get connected with that program when I was in high school. So
Nice.
so, just kind of, yes, it was really incredible. So like really early on at 14, doing your basics of HTML, then getting into Java, active server pages, things like that, designing our own games, doing some network administration. And then what was really awesome was that as part of the program, you'd learn coding during the school year, and then during the summers you were required to complete an internship. So every single year I worked at Microsoft. So I'm like in high school helping to manage a lab or working on a product team or like learning how to create like animated tutorials for some of the internal products that Microsoft was using. So I had this early exposure like really early on, and obviously being in Seattle and being from Seattle, it really kind of helped that connection be made really early on. So that was like my experience growing up, like having somewhat of this tech background, but the disconnect for me was I was highly creative as well. And so I didn't know how to merge those worlds together, but I knew that it interested me how like tech was starting to evolve. So you asked about my education, and
Right.
I actually ended up at the Fashion Institute of Technology in New York City. Just knew I wanted to be in New York. New York was where it was at. Seattle was too slow for me. I was like ready to go to the other side of the country.
Then you saw
And
those rent
also,
prices.
right. Well, you see, and at the end of the day, like Seattle and New York are neck and neck at this point. So
Oh,
it's
wow.
all become very relative. Yeah, Seattle's like it's becoming like San Francisco. Like it's almost impossible to buy. Like I honestly couldn't even afford to buy where I grew up because it's gotten so bad.
Oh, wow.
But I think that for me, New York City presented an opportunity to really kind of find myself in the sense of like, expanding my worldview. And what FIT provided for me was expanding my thinking on how people engage with brands and with products. And so I didn't study design. I studied international trade and marketing for the fashion industry. So I did a lot of internships in fashion. And at the time, fashion was starting to evolve more into the tech space. And I saw classmates who were creating their own brands and, talking about them on Twitter, and everyone had a blog. And I even had a blog and got opportunities to really tell stories about brands and sustainability and kind of this corporate social responsibility that brands were falling into. And so, when I look back on it, I always think to myself, wow, like this was really a great learning ground for user design, in addition to just connecting people emotionally to technology and to brands.
Excellent, excellent. And can you give the name of the person that helped you early on in Seattle? Because it sounds like.
Yeah, so Trish.
Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Trish Molina Zizico, she's actually still very close to my heart and still a close mentor. So she started the Technology Access Foundation. It has since, they evolved from just the after-school program to full-blown academies. So
Wow.
they actually have a middle school and a high school, and they've been teaching, kids who are first generation here in this country. They're working with kids who are extremely poor. I mean, these kids, I went and did a tour of the school, and these kids are out there like making, laser cutting their own prototypes of like all kind of stuff. Like they're learning all kind of things from 3D printing to building and coming up with a thesis for new materials. Like on the West Coast, we have earthquakes, and Seattle's not as bad as California, but we still have earthquakes. And so I think the kids there, when I was doing a tour, were looking at different ways that they can protect homes from earthquakes by changing materials from concrete or wood or drywall to some like new technology that will get stronger as it starts to crack. And so like these kids are absolutely brilliant. And what's interesting about the TAF Academy that Trish has built over the last 20 years
And
what's
the name of it again?
Actually, it's called TAF Academy. So it's TAF, and that's the Technology Access Foundation. And they're actually celebrating 20 years. I was like, oh my gosh, like I was part of the group of I was part of the first group of students that went through the program before it became a full-fledged school. And they actually have the country's first public-private partnership. And so a lot of people, I'm sure, have heard of like charter schools and things like that. Well, TAF was able to do a partnership with the Seattle School District to create a STEM academy that was still part of the school district, but has its own set of curriculum that's focused on all the STEM fields. And they've been rolling this model out and teaching other school districts this model and engaging these kids. And I think like something like 90% of their kids get accepted to college.
Oh, wow.
And most of them end up going into careers like engineering. It's absolutely incredible. I'm just like blown away by the work that they've done. So yeah, definitely check them out.
Yeah, I'm about, because it's funny, when you enter this space, and what I mean by this space is when you start doing things to help provide visibility and exposure for people to cover in tech. Sometimes people are not really for sure like what came before them. Like, I had no idea. You see programs like Black Girls Code, Hidden Genius Project. You see Code 2040, and you thinking like, oh,
Yeah.
these are kind of like the first. And and nothing against what
Nah,
they're
you're
doing,
like,
but
nah.
nah, they're not. And
Right.
when you hear about organizations like TAF Academy, you're like, whoa, these people were doing this back in 90. You said 96, 97?
Yeah, 96. I mean, church diagnosed this problem in 96, but you also have to give credit to folks like the National Society of Black Engineers. I mean, they were trying to
Definitely.
take kids on tours and do this work. And I mean, the reality is that like the challenge is so huge, right? So like not
Right.
one organization is able to master it, but it's like everyone's kind of working on it. And I just think that given the data, right, given the data now, because at first, like, we weren't researching data on how few people of color or how few women were in these fields. Now that we have the data to back up the disparity, then we can
Hmm.
say, okay, now we have a focus
Right.
of organizations and companies that are actually putting funding toward it. So unfortunately, it was, it's 20 years, which is, entire generations have kind of
Right.
been left out here. So that's kind of the sad part about it. But then you're looking at the opportunity where you do have these newcomers who are doing this work, and in some of their communities and in some of their cities, it is the first time. So they are the pioneers.
Right.
And so, but I will definitely say, proximity, it's almost like with Malcolm Gladwell's, tipping point, or some of the parallels that he makes. And it's date and time, right? We talk about like Bill Gates. Well, yeah, Bill Gates is from Seattle. He happened to go to a school that had some of the very first computers, so he had the advantage of being able to get the knowledge in order to build Microsoft. So I think that's the same goes for if you're in a city that is connected to tech, innately, compared
Hmm.
to maybe if you're in a city that is like, Detroit, where, Detroit had dominion over the automobiles. I mean, I'm sure that, most people have had that advantage when Detroit was kind of hopping in that regard. But, so now I'm glad to see that it's reaching communities and people who may not be tech hubs, but
Right.
they still have a vested opportunity to join the space.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because, I came to the realization probably, 4 or 5 years ago, that you, you come into this sometimes thinking you're going to be the savior, right? Um, and then you slowly begin to realize that, hey, that's not how it's going to work. It's going to take the efforts of more than just one organization to tackle this hurdle that we're trying to get over. And so I came to that realization. So that's why I love advocating for other organizations and for
Yeah.
individuals as well that are in this space and they're trying to make a change. And I tell people this all the time when they come onto the show, like, hey, let me know what you're doing. Uh, shoot me an email. I'm not trying to make money off of you. I'm trying to be a catalyst in helping
Yeah.
with this effort that in this journey that we're all embarked on. So, Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. That's a good point. So
Absolutely.
tell me, how did you become involved in becoming a tech writer, and tell us, kind of what it means to be a social impact tech writer.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've always loved to write. And when I was in college, particularly, I got lots of internships with different PR companies. And I ended up actually running a PR company myself. And I just really enjoyed working with brands that were doing something that was very social justice focused. So, again, I was raised in Seattle. My mother and family are from Detroit, Michigan. And, they came out of that like post-revolutionary era,
Mm,
and so I was really raised with the belief that we have a responsibility to our community. And so just with that, I always knew that, social justice was important to me. And so I started writing on issues like, and especially being from Seattle, again, it's interesting just how like much where you grow up impacts you and the person that you become, but also just being an environmentalist, understanding, I would go to class and then go straight up to Columbia to understand what was going on in terms of environmental impact. So I sit in on lectures. I would just sneak into classes and sit in on lectures that were talking about disparities in communities of color. I'd be the only person of color there. I'd be the only woman there. And they're talking about, Black and brown or Black and Latino kids that were being born with all of these deficiencies because of the plastics in their bodies or their susceptibility to different estrogens because of the kind of hair products that we use, or the 99-cent stores that are laced with all these chemicals because they're not regulated and they're on the black market. And that's something also that I learned at FIT when we talk about the multi-billion-dollar black market and then what the environmental damage is because of that. And so the more information I started getting, and I'm sure, like, for everyone who's, been in college and just been exposed to something so new, like you knew that the world had some challenges, but once you really understood the scope of the problem, you
right.
were like, wait, let me just tell everybody I know, everybody and their mama, they need to know that these issues are prevalent. And so at the time, I want to say it was 2009, maybe 2010, when I created my own blog, and it was really focused on what I was learning. So I was in fashion school, so I had an organic beauty blog, and I correlated, vegan lipstick and leggings to, recycling and stamping out pollution in communities of color who are much more affected by things like asthma rates. And the more that I wrote, the more attention I started to receive, the more opportunities I received to participate in conversations about change. And so it really was that kind of aha moment when I realized, wow, not only can I write about communities and concerns that affect the communities, but I could actually use it as a catalyst. As you mentioned earlier, I can use it as a catalyst to not only get the word out, but maybe even look at opportunities to affect policy. Because at the end of the day, when we look at some of the issues that are
Looks like nice. So it looks like I lost connection. I want to try to get Sherrell back real quick. My apologies on this. Just one second.
Please enter your PIN to join this. This free conference call is provided by Uber Conference. Joining conference now.
Hey, Sherrell.
hey, we got you back.
Yeah, yeah. It must have been a UFO flying above or something. This happened last week. For some oddball reason, just in the middle of you know the conversation, it just suddenly just loses connection. So I apologize. We are back,
Yeah, no worries.
and we kind of cut you off, kind of mid sentence there. So
Okay. What was the last thing I was saying?
I'm not sure. But you were
Okay.
talking about
All
being
right.
able
I
to,
mean, just,
affect and change policy.
yeah, just being able to affect and change policy because, I love social media started to become really huge. And I could, people were reaching out to me and telling me how they were learning from me, and little things from how to recycle to, hey, this is what's affecting the Black community. And so when I realized that writing and journalism was actually something that could be impactful, I thought to myself, if I can reach somebody on Twitter, what can I do? What can I do to actually do it for an entire community? What does that take? What does that mean? And so, again, the more that I wrote from my blog, the more opportunities I got to write. So I started off writing about green architecture or in habitat, and then that led to different opportunities. And eventually, now I'm writing for Next City. I'm writing for Fast Company, and so I was writing across a bunch of different spectrums, but always to the bent of, how do these things affect us? And then, what are those trends and innovations that are going to help solve some of these issues that we keep talking about decade after decade? Who's actually going to be creating these solutions? And then how do we empower each other to make this a priority for us to tackle?
Nice, nice. And I love the way, that your how your journey kind of happened, right? Because it kind of parallels a lot of how my journey began as far as starting Blacks in Technology. Um, you know, Starting off initially with Blacks in Technology, it was just as a blog. A lot of people may or may not know that it wasn't this idea of an organization. It was just I'm going to get out there and I want people to understand that there are people of color in tech doing amazing things. So I'm going to write about my everyday dealings as far as tech is concerned, and then it blossomed into something a lot bigger. So I love that. I love that parallel when it comes to how you came into this as well. So you've been doing this for a number of years. What are some of your favorite types of stories to cover?
Oh yeah, I really love stories that really provide a lens of justice. I think that we get bombarded with messages all throughout the day. I'm not sure. I'm such a news junkie, so I'm always looking at Twitter. I'm always scrolling trends. I'm always looking at Google News and whatnot. And sometimes it can be really disparaging. And so I'm always looking for those hopeful stories. Those local heroes. I always
Right.
I did a story a couple of weeks ago about this idea, and I think you alluded to this earlier, of this idea of the savior mentality. There's this one solution that's going to take care of all these issues, and then we're going to be done and move on. But I looked at, who are those local heroes? For me, it was, working at my aunt's hair salon and learning customer service and learning quality and learning design and presentation. That I didn't learn that kind of stuff in an incubator or a fancy classroom. I learned
Right.
that sweeping up hair in the hair salon.
So
to me,
not to cut you off, is that a lost art? Um, just from that whole aspect of customer service, because it's funny because my dad, he was a restaurant manager for a long time uh, when I was growing up, and the way that people approach customer service back then is a hell of a lot different than the way people approach it nowadays. It's it's, for example, when he ran a pretty tight ship when he was the manager of this restaurant, and it was greet everybody with a smile, be courteous, say yes sir, yes ma'am, how can I help you? And nowadays I go up to and I don't eat fast food all the time, but sometimes there's instances where you're kind of rushing, and you have kids and they want something, so you go through a McDonald's and you give your order, and then instead of them handing your order to you and saying thanks a lot, we appreciate it, they just kind of stick their hand out the window and just hand you your food. Like, here you go.
yeah, man, I definitely agree. I definitely agree that there's some challenges there. But then when you look at the state of our nation, you look at the rising cost of living, and then you look at what companies are actually paying people, I would be going
Right.
to a job probably pissed off too, because I'm impoverished and I'm paying to be impoverished. And then I mean, at least in Seattle, I think recently there was a raise on minimum wage to $15 an hour. And I'm not sure if the money will tie to the attitude, but I mean, people are struggling out here. It's
Right.
challenging to get a good education. It's challenging to get access to good transportation. Like, it's expensive to be poor. So, it's not to, I'm serious. Like, it's not to not hold people accountable for their behavior. That's also why I moved to the South. I told you I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. I was like, I need some manners. I'm going to go to the South. I'm tired of people cussing me out on the train. Like, I just want to go to the South and drink some sweet tea and sit on the porch and have somebody call me baby. That's it. I'm good to go.
Wow. That's funny.
But yeah, I mean, just back to, the stories I like to cover, like I said, just hopeful stories of people doing some dope things in the world that are
Yes.
also helping to impact other people, make life better for other people. I've recently gotten into a lot more of these data and artificial intelligence stories and sort of how people are applying it to things like the criminal justice system. So, if you remember, President Obama recently gave clemency to, I think, over like 200,
Yes.
people in jail or people in prisoners who, did not have a history of violent crime.
Yeah.
Or violent criminal activity. I also like to work on trend pieces that are showcasing where entrepreneurs are coming from, because we all think that they're coming out of Silicon Valley, or we all think that they're coming out of the New Yorks of the world, or maybe even the Atlantas. But it's always interesting to hear about the story of the person in North Dakota or in some far off square state, that like they're doing something crazy amazing, and maybe they're not in Silicon Valley, but they're starting to attract resources and they're solving problems locally. So those are the kind of stories that I try to look for.
Excellent, excellent, and I love that aspect. Because and like you said, things are kind of so messed up in the world right now and in this nation that I always like to, I'm kind of like you. I like to focus on these inspirational, motivational stories, that these things that are actually going to provide some type of positive influence to our members, and not that I'm trying to sugarcoat anything, because there's enough media out here that definitely will kind of balance that. But I like to provide our members with those hopeful and inspirational stories to let them know that hey, it's not all bad out here. There's hope out here. There's ways that we can get better, as a community, come together, and make things happen. And not every story
Absolutely.
has to have that negative. We have enough propaganda out here, as it is, especially when it comes to people of color. I don't need to kind of contribute to this negative air that's kind of floating around. I like to focus on the positive and what we can do as a community to help each other.
Right, and I think the emphasis has to be on problem solving, right? I think that, and I was
Right.
having this discussion with Stephanie Thomas, who's a senior associate over at Impact America Fund, and we're just talking about like, so what is the solution, and like what is the future? How do we look at, the only thing that really holds us back is our intellect. Like, it's really in our best interest to make sure that every person that is able, has the capabilities, it's in our best interest to tap into everyone's intellect, right? Like,
Yes.
those are our most precious resources, is everybody's mind. Like, we could solve so many problems. We could get to Mars if that's the goal. Like, if we just say, hey, this is figure outable, or let's go ahead and equip these individuals with the right opportunities, the right education, the right, or just better, or the best stuff, instead of shutting people out. And so I think it's fine, I think to pinpoint what disparity is. Like, we need to be able to have the data to show that, hey, okay, this is happening. We see this trend, and now let's come to the table with some solutions. And we may not get it right the first time. And I think that's fine, but that's the piece that's missing from this narrative of, we know that there's only 2 or 3% of black people represented, in tech. Okay, yeah, we hear it. Everybody is quoting the same, Harvard study or the same Babson College study.
Right.
Like, that's fine. You know what I'm saying? I mean, seriously, like, sometimes it's like, you should have just copied and pasted, because everybody's writing the same story. Like, it just, Fine. But
I agree.
okay, so
Good.
what is the solution? And if that is the trend, who's countering that trend? What are the opportunities that exist? And then let's provide some solutions so that we do see the numbers shift. And so that's where I try to write from that point of view. And I think platforms such as this one are really important to paint that picture that, hey, like you mentioned in the announcements, here's opportunities, here's job opportunities, here's this, here's that. I mean, yeah, we can access it. Now we have the information. So now what's the excuse?
I love it. I 100% agree. I'm definitely of the same mindset. Um, you know, I always tell people when they come onto the show, yeah, those conversations also need to be had. Yeah, we need to hold people accountable, but let's start coming together to figure out the solutions to this. It's one thing to talk about it and talk about it and talk about it. We all know the numbers; they haven't changed in forever, right?
Right.
So let's come together and talk about and for me, and I'm not going to speak for anyone else. For me, I don't want I don't necessarily want Silicon Valley to figure this out for me. I don't want
Word.
the
Word.
I want
Word.
us to come together and tackle this. And that's just my opinion. I have a lot of strong opinions when it comes to this whole Silicon Valley and what is Silicon Valley gonna. I want to take this responsibility on as a community and help raise our community up and not look to Silicon Valley as some type of white knight to come swoop down and help us. Like I just don't believe in that. So I'm glad you said that. That's great stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when you look at the larger tech media, right? Do you feel it's mature? Do you feel like it's serving the public good like the larger news media claims to? And if so, why? And what topics do you feel like they cover well, and what do you feel is being overlooked?
Yeah, I think that there's a wealth of folks from, I mean, your major publications from the New York Times to folks who are well versed, like Wired or Recode, who's done some really great work around developing conversations through, conferences and events, or like South by Southwest, which, just kind of dominates the world when it comes to platforms for tech and innovation and ideation. Um, I think that in terms of the tech media, I think that almost everyone that has a platform in tech should be addressing tech, even if it has to be very niche. So, for instance, for me, the challenge that I have is with Black media, because we have done an astronomically poor job of covering tech.
Mm,
I think that we've talked a lot about gadgets. We've talked a lot about the consumer side of tech. And we've highlighted people who are doing interesting things, but we haven't really developed a deep analytical lens around the way that we tell people of color and tech stories. And so you see folks like myself, or like Amber Payne or Lynn Johnson, all these folks who are trying to sprinkle publications like NBC Black or Ebony or what have you with more tech stories.
mm-hmm.
It's still a significant challenge, because I think some of the consensus is that, hey, like, we are focusing a lot on lifestyle. Like, Black folks, we're great at lifestyle stuff. We're great at, at consumer-based things. And maybe even talking about, the social justice aspect, or even maybe even our health. But when it comes to technology and how it really envelopes our lives, and how it is changing and fundamentally changing how we live in society, and how things are being driven from a city perspective as they're looking at economic development. Like, we are totally missing out. I really say that because we have to hold our publications to task for helping us to evolve with the conversation. And we have not done a great job at that. And so now that we're kind of behind, some of the stories that are coming out are not as deep. They're very surface. And
So,
so when someone then goes to a
can you
wired.com,
right?
uh-huh.
And not to cut you off, I apologize, but this
Yeah,
is
yeah. No, no, that's
I'm over here like beaming from ear to ear because
fine.
I've been saying this for a number of years, and I'm just glad you're kind of echoing these sentiments. But what do you mean by they're not as deep?
I will say that, like, when we look at conversations on like 3D printing and what that means, or what it means for Facebook to be changing its algorithm and newsfeed, and what that
Right.
potentially means for journalistic integrity. I mean, those kinds of things, and then how they relate to people of color, which I believe is what the Black media publications were tasked to do when they first got established. I just
Mm-hmm.
don't see that happening. I think that we have to give people a little more credit intellectually, because I think that we can talk about the impact of energy storage, or what solar panels mean in terms of property value, but then also overall harnessing of electricity. And I think that helping people to understand the terminology is important, right? Because when you're much more informed as a populace, then you can start to develop those interests in tech, or you can find out ways for how they apply to you in your life, whether it be your education or your job. So let's
Right.
go back to the fast food worker. Well, yeah, they're disgruntled and upset, but then if they don't understand the first thing about, the technology space, or the resources, or the trends, or the evolution of what's happening in tech, and how that's affecting their everyday life, well, they can't even have the right conversation to be able to get the job, or to be able to walk into the classroom, because there's some basic fundamental understandings that you have to have, in
Right.
this space, to be able to be a participant. So we talk about being left out in so many industries. Like, tech is definitely one of those. I mean, it really creates almost a class system of the no's and the no nots. And so,
Right.
unfortunately, I feel like, we've done a disservice from a Black media perspective of not letting people know that, hey, here's terminology for what venture capital means. I
Mm.
mean, just very basic baseline terminology, language. What does this mean? What does an LLC? What is an LLC to incorporate? What does that mean? I mean, just
Right.
those kinds of things aren't being said or mentioned. So that's kind of what my understanding, and I guess my point is about, there's just a lack of depth of this discussion happening in our publications.
I just gave you some applause there. I don't know if you heard it, but I I 100% agree. It's funny um, that you mentioned that because I won't say the actual organization, but I was approached to speak to at a meetup for an organization, and I wanted to. This is a tech organization um, as well, right? And they're a black tech organization, and I was asked to come and give a talk. And so there was a specific talk that I wanted to give about a particular piece of technology out there for because I work full time as a DevOps engineer, and this was a particular technology um, within that space. And so I wanted to give this talk, and they told me that that the talk might be too technical, even though I presented it as an introductory talk. And my thing was my biggest gripe with being told that it would be too technical was, isn't that the point? Like, aren't we supposed to give and provide people with information that will allow them to be curious? And
Right,
wouldn't
right.
that then uh, um, that would then spur more questions? And isn't that what you want? Don't you want to be talking about something and someone then says, okay, I don't understand what that means. Can you explain that a little bit in more simple terms? And then you say, oh yeah, so and then you might make some type of comparison or whatever, and then they get that aha moment. Isn't that what this is supposed to be about? Curiosity and learning and furthering your knowledge. If not, then what are we doing this? Because and the reason why I say this is because there are other cultures, other people within other races that are already they're doing this. They're already
Right.
they're already
It's
doing
part of
this
their
type of
everyday
thing.
vernacular.
Exactly.
Right.
So if
Right.
we're not
Yeah.
providing black people with this type of knowledge and causing them to be more curious so that they'll ask more questions, then we're doing them a disservice. And that's exactly how I felt at that moment. I felt that you guys are doing your organization a disservice if you tell me that my talk is too technical, even though it's an introductory talk. Even if it wasn't an introductory talk, you're still doing them a disservice because you're not allowing them to be curious and allowing them to say, hey, what does that mean? Or where can I go to learn more about this? It sounds interesting.
Right.
And I see this
Absolutely. No,
happening
I
not
mean,
not just
um,
in that instance, in that situation, but I've seen this, and I'm happy for Black Enterprise for bringing on Samara Land, who is an extremely technical person. I've known her for a number of years now through Blacks in Technology, and I was so happy because I've been a subscriber to their magazine, and there hasn't been a focus on technology at all. So I was happy when she announced on Facebook that she was hired there and that she would be the tech editor. And I was just like, oh man, that's not only are you hiring someone to cover tech, but you're hiring somebody that's really technical, and that's what we need. That's what we need more of.
yeah, I definitely. And I mean, not to just put the onus on Black media publications. I think when we look at publications that are reaching everyone, I think they've also done a disservice.
Hmm.
And it's just to call it out is that, when I look at, the top trending five, maybe the top 5 or 10 trending stories, you're always going to get the Elon Musk. You're always going to get the Mark Zuckerberg, and whomever is running the latest fintech or, Bitcoin operation.
Right.
What these particular, and I hold not just the publications accountable, but also their journalists,
Right.
because, journalists are supposed to write objectively. And the
Right.
challenge is that when you're only looking for sources that are, either young white males or what have you, and you have not expanded your resource pool of experts, then what it tells me is that you're lazy. And I'm just going to put it out there because I am constantly surrounded by people such as yourself who work in the tech space. So
Right.
yeah, we may only represent 2 to 3% of maybe any given organization, but there are individuals there that also have opinions, and they might be brown, black, yellow, what have you, or from the LGBT community, but they're not receiving the quotes, they're not getting the profile features, or they're being treated as like a special case scenario. So you'll get stories that are highlighting, oh look, this is a person of color and they're doing this, let's give them an applause, versus, hey, if Kimberly Bryant says the next woman, the next Steve Jobs will be a woman of color, that's not just an anecdote for celebrating diversity within your publication. It's a real opinion that should be
Yes.
taken at the same gravitas as Bill Gates. You know what I'm saying? So it's a
Definitely.
challenge. I think that like the diversity, even in tapping resources and sources for quotes and thought leadership, has to change and expand as well and mature. And I think we see that in your platform like Blacks in Technology or People of Color in Tech or the Techies Project, and really trying to show that, yeah, there may be very few of us, but for the very few of us, we're doing some dope things and we're contributing greatly to this space. Like you work as DevOps, like startups don't exist without a dope DevOps team. So
Right.
it's like you have the talent there. So why not ask them their opinions as well? Because they're literally building the future.
Wow. And I don't know if you know this, but a few years ago I led a panel at South by Southwest, and we gave an award to Kimberly Bryant as for being one of the thought leaders in in our space. Um, the focus of the actual talk was how do we how do we how do we get more thought leaders? How do we, I guess, provide more exposure to the thought people of color who are thought leaders within our community, and how do we actually kind of provide or kind of produce more thought leaders within our community? And that was kind of, I had a really dope panel of people, Iori Selassie, Cleavon Blair, who else was on Christine Solis, I think was Chris Bennett was on that panel, and a couple other people. But it's funny because what's so ironic about that is that my focus for that panel was how do we give exposure to the people that's in the nitty gritty that's really doing some really dope stuff in
Right.
technology, and nobody showed it at all. Um,
Sorry to hear
there
that.
were a few people, but for the most part it was pretty empty, and it for me at that time, it was kind of disheartening, and it kind of let me know I haven't been to South by Southwest. I haven't been back since then, but it was kind of disheartening because it kind of told me, at least for South by Southwest, where we were when it comes to technology, and even then, I still have hope for the organizations that are doing the right things and everything like that. But in that moment, it was just like, this is this what we're up against? But I'm glad you kind of you echoed kind of how I felt about the direction and how things are what is being focused on in technology, and it's just a breath of fresh air to hear that, when you're kind of thinking these things and you're wondering, like, am I being a little bit too am I being a little bit too raw about this? Am I being too pure of a technologist when it comes to this thing? So when you hear other people kind of echo these sentiments, you're just like, yeah, this is definitely
Yeah,
the right thing, the right path. Um, so
absolutely.
let's move on to some more questions. What are some interesting ways out there? You've been covering sustainability and equity and how technology is playing a part in that. What are some of the interesting ways out there that tech is being utilized when it comes to sustainability and equity? And then, if
Yeah,
you can,
well,
tell us some of the key players that you've come across in those areas.
yeah, absolutely. I think that some of the issues, the pervasive issues that we're finding in underrepresented and underserved communities, and it almost mirrors in almost all cities that deal with these issues, are access to things like transportation,
Mm,
quality fresh food, high quality jobs or healthcare services. You kind of have these main pillars of challenges, housing, those kinds of things that technology is helping to hack in more ways than one. So you have kind of policy trying to drive new things like maybe working on zoning or developing affordable housing. But then you have things like ride sharing companies that provide opportunities for people to take what they call the last mile. So, you might have a
mm,
bus stop that is still a 20-minute walk to your house. Well, now that we have things like Uber and Lyft, well, you could split, a car ride with a friend to your house, at the price that you might pay to hop on the bus.
right.
So, it's again not a silver bullet to some of these challenges, but when you have innovation that that becomes pervasive in cities, especially once regulations are passed. so that you can have these kind of innovations, or the laws are updated to allow for these companies to operate, then you get greater access. I think the great thing about technology is that you can create more efficiencies. So I personally don't have a car. I don't like to drive. Living in New York City for 7 years, I'm a big user of public transportation. So it's important for me to be able to access things fairly quickly and simply. So I have to budget that in every single day. So I'm looking at these as tools for things like getting to a job interview if you don't have a car. Those things are important. When you also look at issues of like pollution, now you have air quality monitors. You have companies who are creating air quality filters that you can put on your smartphone. We also know that African Americans, regardless of socioeconomic status, have smartphones. So what that means is for people who are only accessing the internet or only using the internet as their main source of connectivity, they're able to do a lot of things, like being able to track their fitness, being able to again hail a ride through their iPhone or through whatever kind of device that they're using. Those kinds of things are important to communities that aren't served. And then also when you look at key players, I'm looking at companies like Thrive Market, which Cross Culture Ventures, Troy Carter, who managed Lady Gaga and will probably be one of the first Black tech billionaires, who's also now over Spotify. His venture capital firm invested in Thrive Market, and Thrive Market is a service that provides organic and natural groceries. I believe it's highly discounted, and for every purchase that is made, they then provide another set of organic groceries for a community that may not, or a person, a household that may not otherwise be able to purchase. And so that in and of itself is a really big issue, because you have, folks who may not have access to these kinds of food sources, or they may live more than 6 miles from the nearest grocery store, or they're taking the bus with their kids. I lived in Bridgeport, Connecticut, and I've always kind of lived in a food desert. So I've always did the shuffle between bus and cab in order to get access to fresh foods. And I've always sat on buses where there was a mom and her 3 kids holding grocery bags and, trying to get home. So that's important. And then just lastly, there is a startup, and the name has just evaded me right now, but like they're doing things with trying to find a way for cities to be able to let people sign up to receive food stamps, and they can fill out the application on their smartphone. And so they can completely digitize the process, eliminate the need for you to go to an office and having to go through all the paperwork and spend your whole day applying for food stamps. So those are some innovations we're seeing that are starting to bridge the equity gap and starting to also help folks get to that next step in their life, which is economic empowerment. Because like we said earlier, it's expensive. It's expensive to be poor, right? And then when you're poor, you have to jump through so many hoops just to get some basic services. So if you can eliminate some of those things, like having, Amazon deliver your food or what have you, I mean, those things, again, by and large, can potentially create equity.
And what's the name of the startup? The one that allows you to sign up for food stamps? Can you mention them?
Yeah, let me just do a little search.
Okay.
I
No
literally
problem.
just read about them a couple weeks ago.
And I love the I guess how they're approaching this problem, because not only does it allow people to kind of expedite the process, but it saves them just from a social standpoint. Some people are embarrassed, to be honest, to go downtown and waiting in that line for social services. And this is a way to eliminate that entire, situation, for, having people to feel like, they're less than whatever. And they don't have to go through that situation. So that's a great idea. I love it.
I think it's just like easyfoodstamps.com right now. I think it's only in Pennsylvania and New York.
Okay.
And I think that they've just been trying to grow because every city or every state has different laws around it. And so I think there's all the legalities around how that works. But I mean, it's an innovation that's needed.
Definitely. And what are you seeing as far as, I know you mentioned that there's a gentleman that's kind of investing in this area. But what are you seeing as far as people of color creating apps, creating companies within this sustainability and equity this space? Are you seeing much of that? And if so, like, or if not, kind of, what do you think is kind of some of the barriers to being in this space?
Yeah, I'm definitely seeing people of color creating solutions. So you have folks like Ace Cowwood, who I met a couple of months ago,
Mm-hmm.
when I moderated a panel for Steve Case, who founded AOL. I met Ace, and he just got I think $500,000 in Buffalo. He like moved to Buffalo because they were offering money for entrepreneurs. And he started Painless
Nice.
1099, which helps freelancers. So we're moving more to a gig economy, right? Folks are doing Uber, or folks are, becoming workers for things like TaskRabbit or Postmates. So, along with that, when you're a contractor, you don't get taxes taken out of your check. So,
Okay.
so ACE makes it easy to do that withholding, saving it for you, so you're not going to get hit with all these penalties. And then that way you have a back-end management system. So, and that's going to be extremely important as, I think it's 40% of the workforce will be freelancers by like 2020 or something like that. So that's a solution, from a financial technology or fintech industry perspective that's incredible. And I mean, Ace is a incredible, brilliant guy, and I think that kind of business is definitely going to go far. And then I look at folks who are doing things like getting solar panels on churches or solar panels on lower income housing to help thwart off things like energy bills, right? So, and you look at things like the Detroit Water Project, right? When you are a person of color and
Tiffany Ashley
maybe of
Bill.
a person, right, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So you're looking at these individuals who are creating opportunities to either crowdfund or, or create actual products and solutions to help reduce the burden of living life where it's expensive to live, right? It's expensive when you look at your utilities, your everyday costs. Again, that goes back to transportation, that goes back to housing. And again, it goes back to pollution because healthcare costs are extremely expensive. And we know that can also be a drain on local economies if, folks are going to the emergency room or, they need access to an urgent care clinic. And even the public health field is getting a lot more diagnostic when it comes to data, because now instead of folks coming to the emergency room every day, well, maybe they can predict when this person may end up having an issue, and now they can work on much more preventative care. So I did I answer your question? I think I just kind of rambled
Definitely.
a little bit.
No. No, you're fine. Definitely. Um, so so we talked a lot about sustainability, and we talked about equity and how technology is a player in both of those areas. So I want to talk more about ThePlug. You're the founder of ThePlug, and I want you to kind of tell us what is ThePlug.
Absolutely. So the short answer is that ThePlug is the definitive source for daily Black tech news, and businesses as well. And it was an idea that I hatched probably earlier this year. And I just thought, I would like to see much more representation in the tech space. And I knew that I can't go and write a million stories a day. And I knew that there were other folks and other journalists. I started kind of doing a personal database of who are the journalists that are writing about people of color, especially in tech. And I started creating these spreadsheets of, folks who are identifying these folks. And I said, instead of me trying to write all of these things myself, why not start to curate something daily that shows folks, hey, we're up in here, like we're out here doing it.
Right.
And it was almost like a test. It was almost like an experiment where I really didn't think that there'd be enough news every single day with people of color featured in a positive light and talking about them in the space of innovation. And so we celebrated our 100th issue of the Daily on Monday, and
Congratulations.
it's thank you. 100 days of talking about the top 5 stories curated from across the web, that's talking about and highlighting people of color, and especially in the tech space. And so it's a challenge. It definitely is a challenge to find these stories every day. But what was more interesting was being able to prototype it. So we launched it mid-April. I had a couple interns, designer. I have a great advisory team. We launched it in April just to test it. Like, are people even going to gravitate towards this? There's so many other things that people subscribe to. How do I earn their respect in their inbox? And so it really was a test, and we're actually going to be launching, ThePlug 2.0, which will be, even more in depth. I write that personal narrative. I talk to people very similar to you, like my life in tech. What does that look like? What are the trends that I'm seeing? Where am I going? Where am I moderating panels? Where am I visiting? What am I seeing? Especially when it comes to people in tech, I like telling that story, sharing the news, and then also, you spoke earlier about people of color getting connected to opportunities to share their stories or to share their expertise. Well, part of it too is, hey, like, here are the opportunities, go ahead and take from it. So letting people know, hey, you can pitch to be a speaker at TEDx or this conference in Berlin. So then it becomes on us to say, I want to participate. So it's not just like we have to go out and find you, but come to us. If you're popping open that email every single day, if you're popping open the plug every single day, at the bottom, when you get to the lead section, that's an opportunity for you to take the lead. That's an opportunity for you to provide your thoughts. It's an opportunity for you to respond to journalists that are looking for experts to talk about artificial intelligence or cybersecurity, what have you. So I knew that I wanted it to do something more than just tell people stories. I wanted it to be an opportunity for both development and discovery.
Excellent. And I commend you on the job that you've done so far with the plug. It's funny because I always try to tell people that the internet is the biggest media outlet that we have, and the more people also backtrack a little bit, it's the biggest media platform that we have. But also, if we don't take control of how we're represented, our image, then we are going to leave it to someone else to do it, and they might not do it as favorably as we would like for them to do. So I always encourage people to do exactly, maybe it's not on the scale of what you're doing, but I always encourage people to do what you're doing in some scale. Right, whether or not it's a blog, whether or not it's it could be a podcast or whatever. We need more representation of our brand. I always talk to people about brands, right? A good friend of mine told me about this probably about 5 or 6 years when it comes to branding and our brand, and he basically said that you have Coke, you have Pepsi, and Coke, they're going to do what they do, right? And
Yeah.
and and they're not going to worry about as far as they're not going to worry about what Pepsi does from a certain aspect. Meaning, if we promote our brand just as much or harder than other brands within our culture, within our own culture. So you might have the entertainment brand, you might have the athletic brand, you might have whatever brand. If we promote our brand just as much, then we're going to garner just as much attention. We're going to get just as many people to look at us as these other brands. The problem is that we don't at this point. We're starting to build that up, but we haven't in the past. We haven't had that push to expose our brand. And when I say our brand, I mean people of color in tech, right? And so that's our brand, and now we need to push that, and not just to kind of shove it in people. It's more or less to give them an option. You have an option to be an athlete. You have an option to be an entertainer or a musician or whatever. Yeah, and now there's an option to be somebody, a person of color in tech, and that's the brand that I want more of us to push, because there's a lot of us out there, but a lot of people don't know that we're out there, and so it's up to us to push that and to put our brand out there. So
Yeah.
I love the fact that that's what you're doing, and you're doing it in a big way, and you're making sure that that you're covering the stories that need to be covered.
Thank you. Thank you. It's always such an honor. I'm always so honored for people to share with me their stories. And I definitely believe that it's a public service. And also I don't believe that I have a choice. It's like I have to,
Right.
right? Like you have a responsibility. When you hear such an awesome story, you have to share it with the world. One thing I want to do, since Stephen Green's hit me up on Twitter about Pitch Black in Portland, one thing I did want to tell you, Gregory, is that one of my most favorite stories that I ever worked on, and I think it was probably one of my best pieces of work, was a
Okay.
story I did on Portland's was a story I did for Next City on Portland's Inclusivity Fund. And that actually got a chance to go to Portland, meet with the mayor's team, as well as I got a tour. Stephen Green actually is a venture capitalist, and he's like the unofficial mayor of Portland. And Portland in the Northwest. Like I thought Seattle didn't have any black folks. Like Portland definitely don't have a whole bunch of black folks, but the
Oh
community that they
yeah.
have there is absolutely incredible.
I,
And I got to go around. It was amazing.
right. Right. Real quick, there's a story I want to tell in regards to Portland. So I went out to Portland a couple of years ago to attend a tech conference called ClosureConf West, and I
Yeah.
was walking downtown in the middle of the day, and I actually walked past a black woman, and she kind of looked at me crazy. And so I looked at her and I was just like, oh, okay. And as I walked past her, she looked back and she mumbled something. And I was just like, what did she say? And I looked back and I was like, I'm sorry, did you say something to me? And she was like, yeah, I never, I think she said something along the lines of, you're the first black man that I've seen downtown. This is in Portland, like
Oh wow,
middle of
that's
the day.
interesting.
And I was just like, "What?" And she was like, "Yeah, you're like the first black man I've seen downtown since I've been here." And and
Yeah.
and and she was visiting, but I was just like, "That's crazy." And she was like, "Yeah." I was like, "Well, maybe because I'm not from here, and I'm visiting
Yeah.
as
Yeah. Well, the
well."
population. Yeah. Well, the population is sparse, but let me tell you this, and this is why I loved working on this story. Is the city put together a $3 million fund
Okay.
to start investing in Black startups, and they've done some really great work around innovation. And the mayor's office is very, very aware that there is a challenge and there's a disparity, especially as Portland becomes a lot more expensive to live in, and displacement is prevalent, especially in a lot of these major tech cities. But particularly important, Portland, you saw this opportunity for cities to start tackling this issue. How do we
Mhm.
ensure, Black and brown wealth? And so with this $3 million fund, they said, hey, listen, like let's start putting people of color in opportunities and positions to get access to the capital, which we typically, statistically, we do not have that kind of access to that kind of wealth. In order to fund our businesses and to grow our businesses. And so when I went to Portland to learn more about the fund, learn more about what the city and the county is doing to ensure that that startups have a variety of diversity when it comes to founders, I also got a chance to learn about several of the businesses that were coming up and out of Portland. So you have I think a droid company, one of the first Black-owned droid companies, drone companies. And then you have NoAppC. Mm-hmm.
No,
And then,
I was
can you still
just
hear
saying,
me?
okay. Yeah, I can.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, but then you also have like noappc.com, and Tyrone, his last name is escaping me, who built NoAppC, and that's really related to when we talk about equity, inclusion, and sustainability. When you go to apply for an apartment, you have to pay for, the application fee in addition to a credit fee, right?
Right.
Well, what if that's not going to be the apartment that you end up in? Well, you're going to have to spend maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars getting into just a place to live.
Right.
And so that can be a burden for so many people, especially, again, of lower income or lower means. So this NoAppC allows you to pay one application fee, and it gives you access to tons of apartments. And so that way you can see off the bat whether you qualify. And that was, again, started by an African-American man, and that's out of Portland. So, that story, working on that story was so inspiring because, again, it's like, okay, this is a place where, maybe 1 in 10 people there are persons of color, but they're over here rocking it and creating a solution that is applicable across the globe.
Right.
So, those are the kind of stories I love to dive into.
Excellent. And does Stephen, does he own like a restaurant in Portland, or?
So Stephen, he's a brewer. So he has like a brewery, I believe.
Okay.
And then he also has VC experience. And I think even prior to that, he was over some economic development initiatives. But
Gotcha.
next time we'll have to go to Portland, and then he can just show us around to all the Black folks.
Right.
Because that's what he did for me.
Right.
But he was really dope. Did you go to the sneakers? It's a coffee shop, but it is like based off of like sneakers. So the guy used to work for Nike, which is based in Portland.
Right. I didn't get to visit
so
that.
So anyway, it's really dope.
I went to spot that was it was kind of, I want to say it was like a nonprofit restaurant, if I'm remembering it correctly. And I thought I met somebody there, and I thought maybe it was Stephen, but maybe it's not. But it was like a nonprofit. I think it was. I'm pretty sure it was like some type of nonprofit restaurant, or like a yeah, it was a restaurant because it was a place that they serve food and they serve drinks and things like that. Maybe it wasn't him, but I love the ambiance and I love the atmosphere that Portland provides, because they have this real sense of community out there, and it's not like overran by big corporate restaurants like McDonald's. And I mean, of course, there's pockets where you'll find those restaurants at, but where I was at, they really take pride in their local economy when it comes to the restaurants and their stores and groceries and things like that. So I thought that was really cool.
Nice.
So what's your vision? What's your vision for the plug?
I knew you were going to ask me that. It's so interesting because sometimes I'm just like a let's just get it done kind of person. And I think when I started out, I had a very different idea about let's just see what happens. And I think now that the plug's really gained some traction, I mean, like it has exploded in ways that I didn't think it would. I've really had to sit down and really think through, how can I be most helpful, and how can the plug be be helpful in driving this conversation. I think that there's so many folks in the content space, that I think that there's so many people working in different platforms to be able to elevate this discussion. So what does it look like for the plug 2.0 to be a leader as well, and to be a leader that helps to develop other leaders? I think that for me, in addition to just hosting discussions and continuing to grow the audience, we'll start to really look at, additional original stories, really highlighting change makers, and just finding new stories to tell. I think that's where we are right now. We're just continuing to audience build. We have a hodgepodge of folks that subscribe who are in the tech space currently, are looking to get in the tech space. We have investors that are looking for new opportunities to find new businesses and talent. We have folks who are just looking at the trends. And so, identifying that audience, segmenting it, looking at the back-end analytics is really important for us as we start to build out what product we may bring to the table to help develop folks. But right now, I know that we just want to get good stories. We want to make sure that we are continuing to build our database of startups and entrepreneurs from every corner and crevice of the country, making sure that we know what they're doing. So, I encourage even folks who may be listening today, let us know, let us know what you're doing. And then just folks such as yourself. I mean, y'all keep us connected to what's going on. And I think that, we want to definitely continue to build relationships, with folks who are looking to amplify the work and the voices of people in tech.
Excellent. Well, I'll tell you this: if you definitely want to know kind of what's going on, we have a Slack community that has exploded. We're almost to 650 members in our Slack channel right now, and we have a ton of activity. There is a channel within our Slack group focused on startups and entrepreneurs, which is over 150 people just in that channel alone. And it's a great community. It's for some, I'm not even for sure, what was going on, but within the past 2 days, we had a slew of people join the Slack community, including Leslie Miles, including Wayne Sutton, and I was just kind of like, whoa, what's going on? Did we get slashed at it, or do we have some type of article on Reddit that I didn't know about? But we had a bunch of a bunch of people just join the channel. But it's kind of exploded, and I love seeing the activity and the conversations and the engagement that's happening. So if you're looking for for stories of up and coming entrepreneurs, people in tech that's in the trenches, I like to say, that's doing amazing things, that's working for some of the major companies out there, then our Slack channel is definitely a place where you're going to find some great people. So I definitely invite you and anybody else who's listening to come and join. So before we get out of here, what's next for you? We've heard kind of what your vision for the plug is and kind of what's next for the plug, but what's next for Sherrell?
Man, I'm just trying to get smarter. I mean, I'm around folks who can just run miles in circles and build rockets. And I'm just like, man, I'm just trying to make it out of bed every day. But
I'm pretty sure you're holding your own.
Honestly, man, I really do find this stuff fascinating. I think what's been surprisingly awesome is that I've gotten some great opportunities to get connected with amazing CEOs and amazing platforms to help moderate discussions, and I'm kind of riding this wave right now. I think I mentioned earlier I got to moderate a great discussion with Steve Case, founder of AOL, and in the governor of Virginia. I'll soon be working on a tour with them, to highlight entrepreneurs in various cities throughout Virginia who are pitching for six-figure deals. So that's going to be really interesting to be involved in that space. And for me, these are always great learning opportunities. It's always great to see, again, for the folks who aren't being featured on New York Times or, the latest tech blog, but folks who are working day in and day out to build their companies and hire people locally from their communities. So I'm going to keep digging into that. And, everything for me goes full circle. So what I do in my life, I try to make sure I find ways to funnel that through the plug or through my writing or, just connect with my friends, some of my friends who are investors or investors who have now become friends who reach out and say, hey, I'm looking for XYZ person. Well, now I have another network to manage it. And then, lastly, Gregory, I'm working on a book. I think mentally I've been working on it for 2 years. And now I'm like, hey, the time is now. I think the time is now. And so I'm working on hopefully looking at looking at those entrepreneurs that just, haven't been tapped, or folks that we should really be paying attention to, and really creating an anthology of their stories. And so,
Right.
so hopefully soon y'all will see me on the bookshelf somewhere, or maybe on an Amazon Kindle. We'll see. We'll see how that goes.
Well, definitely keep me informed, and keep Blacks in Technology informed about your book, and we'd be more than happy to help promote it, help feature it, and I'll definitely purchase it when it comes out. Um,
All right.
so how can people contact you? How can they follow you on the Twitters? Give us your all your good info there.
Oh yeah, I'm on the Twitters for sure. So I'm just Sherrell_Dorsey on Instagram and Twitter, and just Sherrell Dorsey on Facebook. Friend me, the Plug Daily, and then also sign up for the Plug. It's at theplugdaily.com. You can literally just sign up. What I love about it is that you can respond right back to me, and talk to me about your experiences, or what you thought about, the news of that day. And, that comes directly, to me, and we can have a discussion. And so I try to be as personable as possible. But yeah, you can find me there. Or if anybody wants to come to Charlotte, we can go to this new cafe that just opened up uptown. It's called Coco and the Director. I'll buy you
Okay.
a cup of coffee, and we can talk about, we'll talk about all things tech and building the future.
Excellent. And shout out to Stephen Green, because he's been tweeting like mad right now. And been
Right.
following listening into the podcast. So I definitely want to thank him for his support. Stephen, I just sent you an invite for the Slack channel, so you should be getting here pretty soon. I definitely want to again extend an invitation to you to join our Slack channel. I also do want to say that uh, we can't pay you, but if you ever want to throw like a couple of articles our way for Blacks in Technology, we'd be more than happy to feature them on the site. You definitely provide some great information, and something that our community can definitely benefit from. So if you ever feel it in your heart to to help us out, that would be great. We'd love to have you write an article for us. Um, yeah.
Awesome. Cool.
So I want to thank you
Well, thank
for
you.
no, thank you for joining us tonight, and sharing your experiences, sharing your journey, talking to us about your experiences, and talking to us about what you're working on in the plug. And we definitely wish you success in the future, and wish you success with the plug, and keep in touch and let us know what you're doing, what's going on with the plug. It's and I want to stress this, because I say this to people, and I don't know if they think that I'm not serious, or if there's some type of cost to this. But when I have people on the podcast, right? I feel that I've made a connection with them, and I've created a relationship with them, right? And we are far and few in this space, and I always this is not about money for me. This is about providing a platform, providing visibility for our people and the people within our community. And so when I extend these offers, I extend them not expecting anything in return, right? So if anything that you're doing, if it involves a plug, if it involves you, say for instance you're speaking somewhere, let me know. I will find a way to get it into bit, to let people within the community know. I'll tweet it, I'll share it within our Slack channel. I'll do whatever. I'll feature it on Blacks in Technology. I'm just trying to, I think that we have uh, um, I think we have a purpose, and I think that we have a responsibility to make this easier for the next generation, to do what we can to help bring exposure to our causes. And if I can do that, that's what I'm going to do. And it's not a money thing for me. It's not a notoriety thing for me. It's just all about helping us to get to that next level. So if anything that you're doing, just shoot me an email. Just say, hey, Greg, can you share this with your network? And it's done.
I really appreciate that. That's awesome, and I will definitely keep you in the loop and just as you're part of the network. And as far as I'm concerned, you're part of the Plug fam. Everyone that supports us, we definitely want to support and highlight them. So I really appreciate that.
Well, thanks a lot, Sherrell, and good luck to you on your journey and everything you do in the future. And thanks a lot again for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much, Greg.
All right, take care.
Bye.
Bye. Okay, that was excellent. That was a great podcast. I appreciate Sherrell for coming on. That's it for this episode of the Blacks in Technology Bit Tech Talk podcast. Thanks to our guest, Sherrell Dorsey. If you like what you heard, you love the story, if you have any suggestions or comments, email them to us at contactus@blacksintechnology.net. Once again, thanks to Stephen Green for sharing and retweeting everything that he listened to tonight and being a participant of this podcast. Let's see, in a couple of weeks, who do we have? I want to say it's going to be Scott Hanselman, but let me check the calendar here. I want to be for sure on this. In 2 weeks, yes, the one and only Scott Hanselman is going to be joining us on the Bit Tech Talk podcast in 2 weeks. So that is September 15th, 2016. Scott Hanselman will be on the show. I'm pretty sure everybody knows who Scott Hanselman is. He's a developer, he's an author, he's a speaker, he's an ally to the black tech community, and we're going to be having him on the show. So join us in 2 weeks, and until then, tech yourself before you wreck yourself. All right, take care. Have a good night.
Blacks in Technology. 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 Blacks in Technology.